Good morning. My name is Dr. Daniel Franz. Many people call me just Dr. Dan for short. I'm very excited to be with you here today to talk about my area of expertise, mental health and meaning, and more specifically, the idea of leading for meaning, or what is meaning at work. Now, a little bit about me. I am a psychotherapist, a licensed mental health counselor, as well as a licensed clinical addictions counselor. I am a what's called a diplomate in the field of logotherapy. That is the psychology of meaning. A lot of what I talk about today will come from that psychology of meaning. And finally, I'm also a Myers-Briggs certified practitioner. So part of today's discussion will involve some of the topics from the Myers-Briggs. We're going to take all of those ideas and put them together for this idea of leading for meaning. And I want to make sure you walk away from this presentation with information that you can implement as soon as you go back to work. I've worked with a few companies in the past decade or two, 3M, Trelleborg, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and a variety of small businesses and even some school corporations to help leadership teams, management, supervisors understand this idea of improving employee retention, overall group communication, and the idea of organizational health. So hopefully you're able to take something meaningful away from this and to put it to work as soon as you get back to the office or to the plant. So let's get started. As you know, work is changing and small business is going to lead the way. In the past 100 years, work has changed dramatically from the assembly lines of Henry Ford and those like him in the Industrial Revolution. And as you know, I'm sure, work has changed dramatically, I would say at a light speed in the past 10 years. And then we accelerate that even more in the past year of a global pandemic. It's Work has changed. Small businesses changed, large businesses changed. The way we interact with each other and conduct our affairs has changed. And here's just a small example of that, right? I pulled together some images from off the internet of different aspects of work changing in the past year. We see more people telecommuting, working from home. Some organizations have decided that these positions will permanently be moving to home base. And I remember just a few years ago, many people thought, man, it would be amazing to be able to work from home. And in the past year, as we've found, maybe not so much as we try to manage work responsibilities and child raising and all the other parts of life. Many people have found it has stretched them and encouraged them to try new and different things, and many have found it quite difficult. You see in the middle column there, the old idea of a business handshake changed to a fist bump, and, and then some days into an elbow bump. As a psychotherapist, I found many social constructs that once thought were normal have changed in the past year. And finally, on the other side, business attire and location have certainly changed. As you can see by me being up here in the top corner from my home office here in the Midwest, talking to you in Salt Lake City. Ironically, as you heard me begin this presentation with good morning, I'm a morning guy. I love speaking in the morning, but you could be listening to this at any time from any location. And that's just one large way, I guess, in which business has changed. And of course, fortunately, because we're virtual, I don't have to be wearing a face mask, but it's almost become part of business attire as much as the gentleman at the bottom wearing the suit and tie and pajamas. These are just a small examples of how business has changed. And because of that, before this global pandemic, many people were facing mental health issues. National statistics, worldwide statistics would seem to indicate that many people were struggling with mental health. So you can only imagine that in the past year, this mental health crisis may have only accelerated. We see increased rates of anxiety and depression. Severe mental illness is on the rise. Substance abuse and addiction, at one time during the pandemic, had become so prolific it almost became a media joke, in that people were consuming so much alcohol from home at un, uncommon times of day. And with that, unfortunately, we've seen an increase in marital infidelity and betrayal, and what I've coined as pandemic PTSD. Now, I'll tell you, in that slide, the P in PTSD is small on purpose, because when we talk about that kind of trauma, when we talk about PTSD level trauma, um, that's often having your life threatened, that causes that kind of mental health issue. However, we may not have had our lives threatened. Some people have, but we have certainly had our livelihood threatened and our expectations. And many people might be struggling with some traumatic like symptoms. Now, these are not, I'd like to say these are not your concern, but in some way, they're becoming your responsibility in small business. You'll see these in your work environment more often. And I don't want to ask you to fix these for your employees or for the people you work with, but I'd certainly like to ask you to be aware of them. And in that, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can help these areas, or at least help in a way that the people you work with will be a little bit better off. So all of these are solvable maybe in my realm. If you don't already have contacts for your business, it's a good idea to know your local mental health professionals, or even, depending on the size of your organization, to consult with what's called an employee assistance program, or an EAP. I know I function in that realm for quite a few organizations nearby and nationally, 3M being one of them. And for the employees that benefit from this program, it certainly is a very positive thing. So what can you do? One of the things through our discussion today that I want to encourage you to do is to gain a better understanding of this concept of meaning and the psychology of meaning, and what little things you can do on a daily basis for yourself and for your employees that will help with that. Now, when we talk about the idea of meaning, it can be pretty unwieldy. That's a big topic. It goes back almost 2,500 years to the Greek philosopher Plato, who, even today, we trust a lot of his ideas. And so this idea was a pretty important one. Plato told us that man is a being in search of meaning. And since he said that and shared that and began to encourage the proliferation of this idea throughout culture, we've had a lot of examples of how individuals and groups have taken the idea of meaning and done amazing things. We've created entire civilizations and forms of government through this idea of meaning, through searching and attempting to discover meaning. We've developed technology to improve our lives, medicine to prolong our lives, and art and poetry to beautify our lives. These are all examples of how people throughout time have sought meaning and engaged it in a very positive way. Now, of course, unfortunately, other people have sought meaning in a very negative way. We've seen people, under the name of meaning, cause genocide and find ever increasing ways to wage war. We've seen individuals victimized and marginalized, and we've seen entire cultures and groups destroyed and eradicated. So, what is meaning? If it can be so powerfully positive and negative, what does it mean for us now, in our times, in the time of recovering from a global pandemic, and in trying to improve and grow your business? How can you use this concept of meaning at work? Most simply put it, how do you do meaning? And I'll give you a hint. This word responsible, response dash able, not the idea of responsibility, but the idea of taking that you have the ability to respond and decide in meaningful ways. We're going to touch on that. So if you Google, I found this quite humorous. If you Google the question, what is the meaning of life? This will be the first response you get, depending, of course, I would assume, on your search history. And now, hopefully, for some of you, maybe, depending on how read you are, how well read you are, or maybe how poorly read you are, this could bring about a little chuckle. 42 is the answer to the question, what is the meaning of life, in the Douglas Adams sci-fi books, starting with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it's a simple answer. Of course, we know in our complicated lives that such a simple answer can't hardly be true. But my hope for you is that maybe we simplify some of these difficult ideas today, and that you take with you some concrete ways to engage and discover meaning in your life, and to share that with those around you, your family, friends, your community, and those that you work with. My belief is, if more people are able to share these ideas, to respond in a meaningful way, we really will create better work environments and better communities. So maybe the idea of 42 isn't such a far off science fiction one. Maybe we can take that and simplify a little bit. Now, one of my favorite illustrations of meaning is from Hugh MacLeod, who, if you don't know already, I would highly recommend getting to know in the small business realm. Hugh says, that's why we're here, to make a dent in the universe. And I think that summarizes the idea of meaning. Our goal, your goal in small business, not just to make a profit and grow a business, but I believe most of us start in some kind of business to do something meaningful. We might not even know it, but we might start out with the goal of helping others, creating a product, growing a service. But in the end, maybe it's just helping our family to acquire opportunity and experience. I believe that we all have this drive to make a dent in the universe. And if you want to find a copy of that print, you can check out Hugh's website, gapingvoid.com. So let's get a little bit into the history of the psychology of meaning. Plato came up with the idea 2,500 years ago, and only about 100 years ago, Dr. Viktor Frankl started to conceptualize a theory of psychology around this idea of meaning. Now, Dr. Frankl was quite the protege. He was conceptualizing this idea at a very young age. At 10, he starts to formulate this idea. At 17, he is corresponding with Sigmund Freud himself. That would be equivalent in our times to my 18-year-old daughter emailing Elon Musk and Elon saying, yeah, I think you have some good ideas we should chat about. So just an example of kind of where Frankl was early on. As he is going through the university in Austria as a young man, he's formulating this idea. He goes on to become a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, and grows this psychology of meaning in his home country in ways where he is running entire clinics through and using this theory to improve what was at that time a terrible suicide rate in Austria. Shortly after World War One, Austria is, of course, the loser, and the culture is falling apart, and people are committing suicide at a tragic and rapid rate. And Frankl's ideas help to bring about change that way. And he continues to grow this idea. He's lecturing, he's traveling, and he's beginning to write these ideas down, and not just to practice them, but to formulate them in a way to share. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes and World War II breaks out. And as an Austrian Jew during that time, Frankl knows that there's a good chance he won't be able to continue with his work. And perhaps one of the most meaningful stories from his most famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, is the story of how his life, the decision, the meaningful decision by how his life changed, that he had actually received a visa to come work and lecture in the United States. And he painstakingly tried to decide what would be best, most meaningful to do. And at a time, he was talking to his father, and there was a broken stone tablet or broken stone tile on the table he was talking to. That is, his father had rescued from a night of Nazi violence. And Victor asked his father, what is that? He said, well, that is from the local synagogue. And the part that Frankl found was from the biblical verse of honoring thy father and mother. And it was at that point that Frankl said he had kind of had a realization that he was going to stay and try to take care of his parents through the Nazi occupation of Austria. And that was, of course, a life-changing, life-altering decision. As shortly thereafter, his parents went into the concentration camps. His entire family was taken to the concentration camps, and so was he. And he spent 3 years in the Nazi concentration camps trying to truly put his concepts to work under the idea of psychology of meaning. He lost his entire family, his wife, his parents, his siblings, and he was on the verge of death by suicide himself when he was liberated from the concentration camps. He came out of that experience knowing that he had to share these ideas, believing that the psychology of meaning, what he came to term logotherapy, needed to be shared with the world. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning in a less than 2-week period shortly after coming out of the concentration camps. He even says it was a fever pitch to get these ideas and experiences out of his mind and onto paper to share. And if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, I definitely recommend it. It is brief. You can tell he wrote it quickly. He shares his experiences. The first 100 pages are all about his experiences in the concentration camps. And then the continuation of the book is really about the idea of logotherapy and the psychology of meaning that we're going to explore a little bit here today. I do want to say just one more pitch for Man's Search for Meaning. It was one of the top 10 most gifted books of the past century. If you haven't read it, you would do yourself a considerable favor by checking it out. One of my favorite quotes from his work, and let me tell you, Man's Search for Meaning is very quotable. Of course, I recognize I have quite a bias, as in I've devoted quite a part of my life to studying these ideas, but what he says is, life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable. And coming from a man who spent 3 years in the Nazi concentration camps, I guess he gets a little bit of credit for this kind of statement because he lived it, he experienced it, and he knows it. So he shares this with us, and I take this into the world of work to the idea that sometimes some of our employees, some of our days as a business owner or as a business supervisor or manager can be somewhat miserable. But even in those circumstances, even in the circumstances of the past year and struggling through business, life has meaning. And there are ways every day, every hour, every minute that we can discover meaning ourselves and continue to help others find meaning. And even in that act of helping others, we have an opportunity to help ourselves. Now, I've shared a little bit of Plato, some of the history of the psychology of meaning, logotherapy, and Viktor Frankl. And by no means do I seek to compare myself to Plato and Dr. Viktor Frankl. But I want to take all of that history and bring it here to you today with an idea that I've thought of. Humankind, our planet right now, is currently composed of 7.5 billion people, all special and unique in their own way. And that comes from not only logotherapy, but from a variety of psychological and anthropological texts. We know that we're all different with exponential variability in their indispensable and irreplaceable personalities, all in search of one thing. Not money, even though some days it may feel that that's the only thing either we or possibly our employees are pursuing. Not pleasure, even though sometimes in a world such as ours, it feels that way, that we're just being bombarded, maybe even consumed with escaping through pleasure. But that is not our main drive or goal in life. And it's not power either, although as a business owner, as a manager, as a supervisor, as a leader, sometimes we have to learn to use the power and the authority that we have. No, all people are in search of one thing. And even though we may not always know it or recognize it because it can be such a difficult concept to understand, we're all seeking meaning. And if that statement that I shared is true in any way, you are facing, however big your organization, a significant task of understanding and recognizing the indispensable and unique variability of the personalities that you have around you, whether you hired them yourself or they were hired for you. By recognizing, I'm not asking you to recognize the variability of 7.5 billion people, but maybe just the ones you have under your direct care and leadership. Or if you really want to stretch yourself and grow, all of those in your organization, however big it is. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about how you can do that. How do we discover meaning in life, and especially work? That's what we're here to talk about today. But through that conversation, I'm hopeful that this generalizes into your life overall, into the life of those that you work with. So let's talk about the hard, concrete ideas of what it means to discover meaning in your life. So the field of logotherapy, the psychology of meaning, talks about three ways, three sets of values by which we discover meaning in our lives. First, we have our creative values, the things we give to life through creation by writing a book, creating a product, creating a piece of art or poetry or music. For me, it's just creating this presentation can be very meaningful. And so when it comes to our work in small business, when it comes to the work of managing people and running a company, we have an opportunity to be creative quite often. But How do we encourage those that we work with to engage in creative values? For many businesses, this is the idea of allowing employees the opportunity, the freedom even, to think and create in different ways. An individual who is working in a manufacturing situation, doing the same thing over and over, day in and day out, will become burnt out and may become disengaged or even leave the company. A manager, supervisor, or leader who doesn't have the opportunity to be creative in the way that they guide people, that doesn't have the opportunity to grow and learn, will become stagnant. And a stagnant leader can really negatively impact those that they're supposed to lead. So one of the things we can do is to allow for that opportunity for creativity, whether it's in making creative suggestions or taking some time in each day or week to engage the creativity of those we work with. Another way we discover meaning in life is through what we take from life, our experiential values. By experiencing something or encountering someone. Some of those experiences can be as simple as being out in nature, by going for a walk outside, hiking, camping, seeing national parks. These can be, for some, life-changing, meaningful experiences. Some of the other experience, just by watching a good movie or going to some kind of live event, can be an opportunity for a meaningful experience. And one of the most significant ones in the work environment is by encountering somebody else. One of the things we'll talk about here shortly is through those encounters, we can find and discover meaning. And when we encounter somebody in what we call a transcendent way, rising above our own selves, we have the opportunity to discover meaning for ourselves, to help them discover meaning, but we create loyalty and improve retention. By doing that in a meaningful way, we improve communication and our overall organizational health. So creative value is what we give to life. Experiential value is what we take from life. And then finally, our attitudinal values, the attitude we take towards life, and especially difficulties or suffering. This is something we ourselves must live as small business leaders, but an idea we can pass on to all those around us in difficult times, in suffering, especially unavoidable suffering like what we've experienced in the past year. We have the opportunity to choose how we adapt, how we relate, what we do. We choose our attitude in that situation. In those times of difficulty and suffering, we can choose an attitude of resilience and positivity and growth, or we can allow those difficult times to cause us to struggle. One of the things that Viktor Frankl said in his works on logotherapy, in focusing specifically on the meaning of work, is the idea that the work in itself does not make the person indispensable and irreplaceable. It only gives him the chance to be so. The job at which one works is not what counts, but rather the manner in which one does the work. And I think this is so powerful. In my time as a consultant and in working with different organizations, before I really, before I got good at consulting, I think, I really didn't always see those opportunities in work. Different jobs had different status, maybe different opportunity. But what the study of the meaning of the psychology of meaning has taught me is that all work has the ability to make a person indispensable and irreplaceable. And interestingly, one more reference, if you haven't read the works of Seth Godin, specifically linchpin, he talks a lot about the indispensability in choosing to be indispensable and irreplaceable. And in fact, if you can see behind me, that is a Hugh MacLeod work stating Seth Godin's point that we all have the opportunity, regardless of what our work is, we all have the ability to be a linchpin, to be indispensable, but it becomes a choice. It becomes an attitudinal value. And this is something we can pass on to anybody in our organization, regardless of role or status. Everybody has a choice to be indispensable and irreplaceable. Everybody has the opportunity to make their work indispensable and irreplaceable. It's a choice. We can choose meaningfully. As the great current pop psychologist Jordan B. Peterson tells us in his Rules for Life, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, not what is fast. And that is so true in business. It's so easy to look for fast solutions to handle employee situations in the quickest, most expedient manner. However, that's not always the most meaningful. And when we behave meaningfully, we change our culture. We create an environment where people want to work, where people want to be a part of our organization, where they want to grow and improve the businesses in which we work. This idea of meaning, as ethereal as it might seem, really can directly impact the quality of the work you do, the products or services that you put out. So, what is meaning at work? Our employees want work and work environments that allow for creativity and problem solving. Meaning at work is work that allows us to give. It offers new experiences and opportunities to grow and evolve, and it gives us a chance to interact with others in meaningful ways. Work that is meaningful is of service to our family, our community, and our society. Meaningful work is work that allows us to step outside ourselves, to transcend the self, as we say in logotherapy, and to serve a greater good. And regardless of what products your business creates, what services it shares, any business has the ability to find these opportunities to discover and provide meaning. But it takes some work to get there. So, what is that work? What is it that your employees need from you? What is it that your supervisors, managers, what is it that you need to discover meaning? And in discovering that meaning, improving the retention of your organization. And the thing that I really have seen in the consultation that I've done and the work that I've done with different organizations, when a group works on these simple things to discover meaning, the entire organizational health improves. So I want to give you some that you can take with you and start to use tomorrow, right? So when I wrote leading for meaning, lead certainly is an acronym for you to take and work with. You'll have these slides at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to worry about taking notes, but if you can commit these to memory or just write them down afterwards. Lead. L is for learn. Learn about your employees. Some of the most successful supervisors, owners, managers, bosses are those that know a little bit, just a little bit, or even sometimes a lot about those people that work for them, about their likes and dislikes, what they do in the evening, what are their interests, why do they come to work every day, what motivates them, what do they like to do on the weekends, what gives them meaning in their lives. By learning just these little bits about our employees, we create a connection. If a manager learns about their people, They are transcending themselves and giving to that person, creating a bond that only increases organizational health and employee retention. It's such a simple and small thing to ask. But in my experience, those supervisors that go out on the floor and walk the plant or walk the business and just chat with people are those that have the most successful operations, and those that stay hidden and hold up in an office or meetings all day, every day for weeks at a time and don't know the people that work for them often have businesses that fail. And it's such a simple thing to do. I can think of one example where I was curious. I was a new consultant on the floor and just wanted to know about the products and what people did. And I had the director of HR lead me around to see what this group did. And I was just having an attitude of curiosity, but I could tell that these people were starved for attention. And when they got just a little bit of it, when they got the opportunity to share what they did, you could see the pride. And that pride certainly built some organizational credit. Learn about your employees, learn about the work groups that you're a part of. And I can tell you, if you want to take that even further, my favorite way to do that is by working with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI, to find out who your introverts and extroverts are, who your planners and visionaries are. It can be such a powerful tool. Learn about those that you work with. Engage them. E. When we know a little bit about those people, when we know a little bit about the people on the floor or the people in our management teams, we can engage them in their uniqueness. And that's what we talk about in logotherapy. If we're all unique individuals with a myriad of personality variables, having some of those attended to on a daily basis is an opportunity to connect. And in that connection, we grow loyalty, retention, communication, and health. So these two go hand in hand: learn and engage. For each individual, especially those closest to you, I recommend management teams going through a Myers-Briggs process to understand each other's differences and to work through some confusion. But then you have to take that information and engage it every day. With that, when we talk about work that is of service and transcends the self, that is the idea of answering the big question. Everybody in your organization, if you want to keep them around, needs to know who they serve and how they serve. If you're making knee replacement parts for the medical field, it's pretty easy for the grinder out on the floor to know what they are creating and how meaningful it will be to somebody else. However, that can get lost. Sometimes the big question of fixing parts for a knee replacement isn't as important as just recognizing that sometimes being service to your supervisor can be equally as meaningful. And so that's a great question to ask of every level of the organization. Who is it that you're serving? Who is it that you're going beyond yourself, transcending yourself to do better work for? And in doing that, again, you increase connection, and that only helps retention. And finally, D, we're going to learn about people. We're going to engage them in their uniqueness. We're going to help them. We're going to help everybody answer the question of who they serve, who is their customer in the organization or outside of the organization. But finally, D, design and develop. It's so important for people to have the opportunity to learn and grow. And by designing assessments, designing ways to measure performance and effectiveness, and then allowing our employees to develop themselves is a powerful tool for meaning and for organizational health. These are the things that you are charged to do with in leading a small business. And they're not easy tasks, but in my opinion, they really should be fun ones. They should be why you go to work in the morning, to grow that business, to grow those around you, So I'm just giving you 4 simple ways to do that. Learn about those around you, engage them in those things you learn. Answer the question for yourself, but help them to answer it. Who do I serve? And finally, design assessments and allow those employees to develop. These small steps can make powerful change in your small business. So I want to leave you with this quote, one of my favorites from Viktor Frankl. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read it to you because I love it so much. It says this: don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. And I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run. In the long run, I say, success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it. By engaging in meaningful, responsible decisions and actions on a daily basis, your business will find success. That is difficult in a culture that tells us every day it has a cure or an easy way to find success and happiness. Finding it might be easy. The idea is finding it is easy by engaging in meaningful pursuits. But the action of doing it can be difficult. And so I want to leave you with those few ideas there just to take with you. If I can be of service in your pursuit of meaning, it is my honor and pleasure to answer any questions. I really, as I said, I've dedicated much of my life and career to understanding this and sharing it with others. My goal, what brings me meaning, is to share these ideas with more and more people, and that's why I'm here with you today. So if I can help you understand these or digest these more, if you have any questions, I believe you can work through the Small Business Expo to contact me directly, or if not, hop on my website, danielafranz.com. Feel free to email me, connect with me on Facebook. I hope this has been an opportunity for you to discover meaning. As I said, I know I love doing this. It's an opportunity for me. Thank you so much for your time. And if I can be of service, please feel free to contact me. Take care.